Hello, today I'm going to share my thinking about how I can use the Phonics instruction planning, observation, and reflection tool for planning my weekly lessons. So you can see here, this is a tool that we've been using for a while now. It's pretty versatile in this format because I can either teach a lesson and then use it for reflection. I can use this tool and go into a colleague's classroom and take notes while I'm observing their phonics instruction, or I can actually use this document to plan my own instruction. Now, when I plan phonics, I tend to plan a week at a time so I can see how the skill develops across a week or at least several days. So when I went to use this as a planning tool, I ended up adding several columns to the right so I could show what that would look like on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and so forth. So this is what it looks like when I have it all filled out and planned. And I'm going to walk through and kind of share my thinking as I use this tool. So the first thing that I did was I needed to establish my learning target or my focus. To do that, I went down to my scope and sequence so that I could look to see what skills I should typically be teaching at this point in the year. This is right at the beginning of the second semester, which means that I should be working on final digraphs at this point in the year. That also aligns with what my formative assessment has been telling me. A couple days ago, I was testing to see if kids could read the initial SH digraph, and all but 4 kids could read a list of 5 words of nonsense words, and then when I put it in a connected text in a sentence, all of my kids could read it. So I feel like they're getting pretty strong with the SH digraph. Now we're ready to apply it towards the end position of the word. So once I've established my learning target, my focus for this week, the next thing that I tend to do is scroll down here to where I have the decodable text section. For me, I appreciate knowing what text I'm going to use because a lot of the time then I can go into that text and pull out some of the words and use those words for my encoding and my decoding sections. I just feel that helps bring alignment across the different days of the lesson, and so for me, that's how I tend to do it. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but if you like to have each of those pieces kind of flow together and prep kids for that decodable text, that would be my next step. So step number 1, I found my focus. Step number 2, I found my decodable text. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then once I was in my decodable text, I pulled out what are some of those words I could use across my lesson. I also tend to just do a Google search of words with that pattern, so I have a list of words ready that I can use across each different section of my lesson. So at this point, I'm ready with my list of words. I'm ready to plan my instruction. The first thing that I do is I plan for my PA warm-up. Now, I want to make sure that this is clear. This tool is just planning for phonics. This is not planning for shared reading. It's not planning for one of my lesson time periods. It's really just thinking about explicit phonics instruction. So in this box here, I was only planning for how I can use phonemic awareness to help to activate kids' knowledge of that pattern so that when I get to the phonics part, we've already heard that pattern. That means I probably have other PA drills that I'm going to do during shared reading or across my day that I'm not listing here. When I looked at my scope and sequence, they should be at the point where they're starting to work on segmenting 4 phoneme words. So I'm probably going to do some explicit drills just on that skill where I don't use pattern words or I can use any set of words because I'm just training the specificity of their ear to hear that 4th phoneme. For here, though, I'm really thinking about how can I use phonemic awareness to support print learning. So each one of these activities you're going to notice is going to have lots of words with that SH digraph because I want to start to prime that phonological processor to be hearing that sound. So when we get to the phonics part, they're ready to map that sound to letters. When I was planning this activation part then, I really wanted to think about what is it in PA that makes the SH digraph challenging for students. The first thing I thought of was just hearing the sound. So right away, I'm just doing an identification. Does the word have sh? Then I thought, what are other things that confuse kids? I find that kids tend to get confused with the difference between sh and s. So I wanted to make sure they could hear the difference between those sounds. And when it's the sh or ch sound, that also can confuse kids. So I wanted them to hear the difference between those 2 sounds. So I thought about what are other similar sounds that might be confusing and how can I purposely help kids distinguish between those sounds. Then at the end of the week, because I know that I'm trying to get kids to that 4 phoneme segmentation, I did have them start to work on 3 and 4 phoneme segmentation, applying it to some of those pattern words. So like I said, there's other PA drills that I'm doing, whether I'm using Hegarty for distributed practice or some other routine like 95% group or Kilpatrick for explicit instruction. That's really getting them to continue to progress through our scope and sequence. But for this tool, I was really thinking about what are ways that I can use phonemic awareness to activate kids' hearing of that SH digraph so that when we move on to the next step of our lesson, they've already heard that pattern and they're ready to map it to letters. So now that they have heard that pattern and they're ready to move on, I talk about with them, what is that pattern? That pattern is a digraph. And so I review with them what is the definition of a digraph. And then I want to go through and explicitly teach that pattern. So you'll notice right here I'm being very explicit about what is the SH digraph, how it's two letters working together to make a single sound. And then the part of this section that I tend to miss is this part right here where we check for understanding. I want to know, do students just have pattern recognition down before we even move to reading words with that pattern or writing words with that pattern? So on this day, I'm being pretty explicit. You can see that I'm reviewing the definition of a digraph. I'm explicitly teaching that rule. I'm modeling for them how we can identify that pattern. I did it both in PA and in print. And really, this PA part is a lot like what we just did for the PA warm-up, but now I'm labeling it. I know that shed has the SH digraph versus said does not have the SH digraph. In print, I know that MASH has the SH digraph, two letters, S and H, working together to make a single sound, whereas MAS does not. And then I start to scaffold and release responsibility, and they do that same check for understanding as a we do. As you look across the week, you'll notice that we are releasing that responsibility. So here, we did a we do as I released it. On Tuesday, we also do a we do. But by Wednesday, I'm thinking of a you do. And then I've changed the prompt a little bit to help them to be more metacognitive, and they're going to talk with a partner. So it's kind of that combination of the we do or you do, depending on how much think time I give them in advance. So the big idea for this section is we've warmed up our phonological processor, we've heard the sound, now I'm taking it to phonics by helping them to identify and name that sound, name that pattern. I am using academic language, I'm reinforcing that pattern over and over again, and I'm not forgetting to check for understanding. Kids need to be able to identify the pattern before they apply the pattern. And the whole way across, we're using that gradual release so that I know that kids can independently identify the pattern. Now that I feel confident that they know the pattern and they can identify the pattern, I can go to encoding or decoding. So there's two sections here, one for decoding, one for encoding. For full transparency, a lot of the times I like to go to encoding because I've warmed up their phonological processor, we're already stretching sounds, and in my head, I want to get them to write those sounds. I know that encoding can be a little bit more of a hassle though because you need to get out whiteboards or some way of writing. So if you would prefer to do decoding first and encoding at another time, that's fine too. The biggest thing here is just making sure that you do not skip both of those steps. And the difference you'll notice is that with decoding, I put the letters on the board. I don't tell them what that word is. We use Elkonin boxes or we use some other routine to help us to figure out how those letters are working together to make sounds, and then we read the word. Versus encoding, I start with sounds. So I already know the word. I'm stretching those sounds. Then I'm trying to figure out how do I take those sounds and translate them into letters. So we need to make sure that we're doing both explicitly every day. When you look at my planning, I don't really have a lot written over here to help actually guide how I teach this. For my planning, I just wanted to make sure that I had my list of words. You'll notice that every day there is an I do, but the weight of that I do is scaffolded out across the week. So on Monday, I have several I do examples. By Friday, I'm just leaving that one I do example for that one or two kiddo who maybe hasn't totally solidified the pattern and they could still benefit from my modeling. You'll notice the weight of the you do shifts across the week as well. So on Monday, I just put one in there because I just kind of want to get a pulse, like, are they picking this up? Do they understand what I'm saying? By the end of the week, though, you notice it's heavily the you do. I want them to be practicing that skill independently. And that's for both encoding and decoding. So you can see how that gradual release goes across the week. What really is going to help me then with instruction is looking at the actual bullets of the success criteria. That's what's going to remind me that when I'm decoding, I am not reading the word. I always trip that up. So using these bullets will help me to know exactly how it is that I need to teach those words. But in planning, I'm just listing my words so that I know that I can gradually release that responsibility across the week. So we started by activating our phonological processor. They heard the sounds. Then I started to tell them what that sound is. I labeled it using academic language, and I checked for understanding of the pattern. Next, we practice both encoding and decoding, and again, it doesn't matter, in my opinion, which one you do first or second, just so long as you do both. And across the week, I'm releasing that responsibility to kids. The last thing that I want to do is actually take it to some connected text. So remember, I started with this for the planning purpose, just so I had my list of words. For me, the text that I picked was reading A to Z decodable text. I just kind of like them. I feel like they feel a little bit more story-like. The challenging thing to them is that they are a little bit longer, so it took a little bit more planning for me to think about how I would release that text across the week. If you would rather just find one paragraph decodable text for them to have connected practice, and you just want to do a different text each day or a different text a couple of days, that would also be fine. And it would simplify your planning a little bit because you wouldn't have to think about how to scaffold your pages across. The idea here is just reinforcing that gradual release, though, and making sure they have connection in text. When I had picked my decodable text, I also had to pick a routine. So there's two different routines. The decodable text routine, which is what we use with 95% group, where you're highlighting those pattern words, just reading those pattern words, and then eventually reading them in the context of the story. Versus the connected text routine, which is a little bit less explicit. It's more about reading the text, and then when you come upon one of those incidental decodable words, pausing and modeling how you're going to decode it using a lot of those same routines that we're using in the decoding section of our lesson. So kind of noticing, hey, look, this word is W-I-S-H. I notice that the S-H is that digraph we talked about. So that's two letters working together to make one sound, sh. That means when I read this word, it's w-i-sh, wish. So less formulaic in that pattern, or in the routine itself, more incidental as you come across those words. For me, I feel like that decodable text routine is really helpful sometimes at the beginning of the week because you are getting a high predominance of those decodable words. You are practicing them over and over and over again because of the frequency within the text, and so it's very explicit and it gives them the repetitions they need. By the end of the week, though, especially because I was releasing them more to the we do or the you do of the reading, I felt that the connected text routine could help support them. We're just going to pull out a couple of words. We're going to apply those decoding strategies we've been practicing, but it's not the same formulaic pattern of highlighting all those words. So that's kind of how I decided which routine I would end up using. And you'll notice in here it does say single syllable or decodable text or other connected text. So for me, I chose to do a short little bit of decodable text every day, and then I also made connections to our longer shared reading text. But you might notice that if your kids are really picking up that pattern quickly, maybe you only need to do a day or two of decodable text, and then most of the time is in your other connected text. There's nothing in here that says you have to do decodable text every day and some other connected text every day. You just want to make sure that in some capacity, kids are applying this pattern to some form of connected text. Now, just like with PA, we talked about how there's going to be more PA drills and explicit instruction than just activating for the SH digraph. The same is going to go down here beyond just phonics application to my connected text. So I happen to notice in my shared reading text that there are some SH digraph words, so I made note of those so I could explicitly point them out. But this is not the end of my shared reading plan. This is just a brief portion of my shared reading plan, and from there, I'm going to also teach my language skills, and I'm going to teach my literature skills or my informational text skills, and continue through my shared reading experience just like we've always done. The benefit of this tool, it is helping me to apply what we know to be best practice about phonics instruction, explicit phonics instruction, and really be thoughtful about how I can use both the phonological processor and orthographic mapping in order for students to learn that pattern. So that is how I planned this with this tool in a nutshell. If you have questions, I have a document that has kind of all of my thinking scripted off to the side as well, so you could review that as well. And please don't hesitate to reach out to your instructional coach or to me, the curriculum lead. Have a great day.